Ever struggle with your goals and not sure where to go about or what the right direction is for you to see the best results from your strength training? Well, we're here to give you some insight on that. I'm Coach Eric from the Arsenal, and this is
Coach Brandon.
So we're going to give you some feedback on, based upon what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve, what's going to be kind of the best set and rep range for the adaptation or change that you're trying to occur. I will tell you, long story short, whatever your goals are, you should be implementing a little bit to some degree at different points throughout the year. However, when you have direct goals, you should be spending a little more time properly planned in those certain areas. And so Coach Brandon here with his beautiful beard is going to help get us started on what some of those adaptations look like.
So yeah, like you said, in some way, shape, or form, pretty much all of these aspects should be in your training, whether it's a little bit combined of multiple things or focusing on one thing for a little while, transferring to another and progressing that route. But what I want to do here, what we want to do is give you an idea of what the set and rep ranges for each segment should be. I have a lot of kids at the school that I'm at that come in and they want to increase their bench press. I know it's crazy, high school boys and their bench press. But they'll come in and then they'll max out and then they'll be like, well, I just need to, if I can hit this for 10 reps, I should be able to hit this for 1 rep. And it's like, kinda, but that's not really how it works. So, and kids aren't the only ones. I have a lot of individuals at the Arsenal and just adult athletes that just don't understand the concept of training based off of what your goals are or what you want to achieve. If they're very general, you, like I said, hit a little bit of everything. And honestly, your entire workout can be built that way, where one thing may be working to power, 1 or 2 things for strength purposes, a couple other things for hypertrophy, and then finishing out something endurance based. So there's nothing wrong with that. And once again, it's all based off of what your goal is. If you're trying to compete in weightlifting or powerlifting, we really need to, especially if you're in prep for it, is we really need to be mostly in these 2. Getting stronger, being able to produce more power in those movements that you have to be able to perform in. But outside of that timeline, if we're not in preparation for a competition or for something, maybe we need to put on a few pounds and doing that as healthily as possible. I don't know if healthily is a word, I just made it a word. So putting on a little bit of muscle and putting on a little bit of size, but then also just having a good capacity, and you'll get that through some hypertrophy and some endurance work. So nice little simple chart here that we're going to go through. And basically you can see here we got sets, reps, percentage ranges that we're looking at. So I'm actually going to start on the endurance and we're going to work our way back to the power. Anything you want to add before we get going there?
I do. Just so you guys are aware too, like, again, your goals go into this. There's a million roads that lead to Rome, right? A million different ways to skin a cat. It is important to understand, if you are implementing everything to some degree in all sessions, that's a great way to set it up, but you're never going to really maximize one of those areas, right? So if I do want to get the most out of specific areas, I do need to focus more time and energy there rather than spread thin. But again, when I'm doing that, I need to have that concentrate in different points of the year. So understand, as we talk about this, there's always an it depends factor, like always an it depends factor based upon your situation, your life stresses, your goals. There's so many variables that go into that. So just keep that in mind as we're going through this.
And also with that too, like I said, there's a million different ways that you can do this. So one thing isn't necessarily going to be the right answer. So once again, this is a very basic premise of how you can set something up. And I actually lied to you. I'm not going to start on endurance. I'm actually going to, oddly enough, start in the middle with strength. That's one, to me, in personal experience and my personal thought is, if you can get stronger, just about any of the other ones can come along easier. So we're going to start there. And a great individual, much more intelligent than probably both of us combined, that I've learned a lot about this from, is Dr. Andy Galpin. If you've not listened to his series with Andrew Huberman, there's one where he deep dives into this 1,000 times more than what we're going to go into it.
We're hoping to keep this maybe 15, 20 minutes. They go on 3 hours for 6 episodes. So yeah.
For strength purposes, one of the things he said that you can do really for it is the most simple thing of the 3 to 5 setup. So you've got 3 to 5 sets of 3 to 5 reps. So we'll just put that in here. So number of sets in strength, you're looking anywhere from 3 to 5. We can keep that same thing on the reps. And once again, this can be toyed with, add a little bit, drop a little bit, but for basic premises. And I always tell people in the percentage range that we're looking at, to get stronger, you're typically looking at working in like the 70, maybe 75% as your baseline, up to about 85% is going to be your rep range or percentage range that we're really looking at. This is also assuming that you have an established 1 rep max, or you have a good idea of what you're capable of moving.
So those are kind of just loose variables, right? Like that's not going to be an exact, but no, this is a good general range. You know, some people can see good adaptations at 60-65% still. Some people need to get more in that 75 to 85% range. So it is, again, where it kind of depends a little.
Yeah. And to kind of go along, like if you were programming for gaining strength, one great thing you can do as basic setup as possible really is start off where you're going 3 sets of 5. We're going to start at that 70% range, go through that, see how that feels. If that was easy, then the next time, say we're squatting. So we squat at 3 sets of 5 at 70%. We go through that was easy. Didn't feel that tired. My legs were good afterwards. So the next time we're going to squat, let's go 3 sets of 5 at maybe 75%, or you can meet in the middle, say 73%. Just do a very basic progressive overload. What is also would be kind of a linear periodization. So we're just slowly increasing that weight or that load week by week or session by session that we're doing. And going to the point where maybe we get up to 80%, but we can't get all 5 reps on 1 or 2 of those sets. Okay, let's back it down. We're still gonna go 3 sets, but we're gonna go 4 reps this time. So we'll go 3 by 4. We maybe back that percentage down a little bit and then start building back up. Once you get to that plateau again, then 3 by 3. So multiple ways you can set that up, but anywhere from 3 to 5 sets in the 3 to 5 rep range, and then a very loose basic 70 to 85% in those particular movements that we're talking about. Anything to add on in strength before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, in that basic premise of like if you're going 3 by 5 and trying to add just a little bit each set, you know, you could probably jump right away to 80 to 85% in weeks 2 or 3. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get stronger faster, right? So keep that in mind. I will get, in the short term, I may get stronger faster, but I'm also setting myself up to reach a plateau quicker. I'm also going to put my body under a lot more stress. So if I'm not managing my other stresses outside the gym, my sleep, my food, my water, my relationships and lifestyle, finances, all that stuff, it's going to be really hard to come back from it. So you want to make sure you're paying attention to what's the maximal recoverable volume I can handle and what's my minimum effective dose, right? RP Strength talks a lot about this. Dr. Mike Israetel from RP Strength refers to a lot of the minimum effective dose. So if I'm going 3 sets of 5 at 70%, and then I'm increasing by 73% to 73%, then maybe 75, 78, progressive weeks, I mix a deload in every 4th or 5th week, I'm gonna allow myself to keep climbing a ladder much longer, all right? But it's not gonna be as steep of an incline. If I'm trying to jump to this 85%, go 70, 75, 85, or 80, 85 by week 3 or 4, I'm probably getting a steeper ladder. I'm gonna get to a certain point quicker, but then I'm gonna end up staying at that level for a much longer time frame, especially if I'm not adding in the factors to help me recover. So, you know, we are, as humans, creatures of adaptation. This helps force or spark the adaptation, but your recovery is what actually completes the adaptation. So if we don't recover, we're not sleeping, we're not eating to fuel the progress we're aimed at, you know, you're not gonna see the effects you're aimed at. So the training doesn't, I don't wanna say it doesn't matter, but matters much less if you're not putting in the effects that help you recover from the training.
Very good. Okay, so we're gonna move to the right. We're gonna go to the hypertrophy stage here. So if you don't know, hypertrophy is basically just gaining muscular size, getting bigger, getting more jacked. And it's going to be similar, but a little bit more in essence of sets and reps, more so on the rep side, and then probably gonna be lower on the percentage side. It doesn't necessarily have to be. You could work up into the higher percentage here for some hypertrophy, but you're gonna be working for it, and you're probably kind of those lifestyle factors he was talking about. You're gonna probably feel a little sore, and as long as you can do that and you can still recover from it, it's great. But that once again, we'll go through that broader range that you can work on and still achieve those desired results you want. So
I think a good visual too on something like that, you look at like elite level competitive powerlifters, and they've got big legs, they got big hips, they're strong. They're stronger than what you're gonna see at elite level bodybuilders. But if you look at guys who have similar I would say similar size or weight, you know, their body weights are similar between bodybuilders and powerlifters. You're going to see bodybuilders going to be able to do more reps at a higher percentage, but they're going to be bigger, but they're going to have less ability to get into that higher rep zone or that higher weight zone. So like, just because a muscle's bigger doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be stronger at that top end. And just because I'm stronger here, you know, in that 70-80% range doesn't necessarily mean, you know, if I can do that for sets of 8 to 10, it doesn't mean I'm going to have a higher one rep. It can, it means there's potential for it, but just wanted to lay that foundation for you guys so you're aware, like size and strength do not necessarily correlate. That's a big part of why we want to separate the difference in set and rep range for you guys.
Yep. So I personally, as far as the sets go on hypertrophy, I actually like it about in that same thing, that 3 to 5. You could even maybe say 3 to 6. Once again, it's going to be dependent upon what kind of volume you're wanting to achieve, which is a whole different deep dive that we can get into at some point. But we're going to, for simple purposes, we're going to keep it at that 3 to 5. Now the rep scheme here is going to be what really changes, because you're really not going to be pushing much hypertrophy if you stay below 5 reps. If you do more sets of it, and once again, that volume thing comes into play, whole different scenario. But for what I would recommend, generalize on rep schemes for hypertrophy, you're probably looking somewhere in like the 6 to 12 rep range, maybe even pushing about 15 or so. But we're just gonna put 6 to 12 for the time being. And then percentage-wise, this is gonna be based off of which amount of reps you are using or utilizing here. If you're pushing 12 reps, I'm sorry, but you're probably not gonna be anywhere above 70%. If you are, you're gonna be feeling it. So on that 12 rep range, you're probably looking more, I'd say 60-ish%. You could even go a little bit lighter than
maybe
that.
70, but by the end of the cycle, maybe 70. But
yeah.
if you're able to hit that early on, that means you're not very, like your top end strength's not very good. So we really probably would be better off spending time there. But go ahead.
So for the broad rep range or percentage range, I mean, we've got a 15% difference in the strength. I'm going to kind of stay along with that. So we're actually going to just say 55 to 70% is what we're going to be looking at for the hypertrophy. Once again, this can always be differentiated based off the number of reps you do, based off how you feel for that particular day. All kinds of stuff goes into correlation with that. The number of sets you're doing. If I'm only doing 3 sets of 6, I might be able to push a little harder than 70%. You probably can, but how much hypertrophy are you actually pushing at that?
Total volume, like I said, without going into too big of a deep dive, like for me, volume is going to be one of the biggest variables to help adjust for hypertrophy, right? But there's so many ways you can do it. And then the thing too, like you get someone who's lower trained on that higher like intensity end, like they probably can push maybe 75% here for 10 or 12, but again, like you're not gonna see much more increase from a set of 1. On the flip side, you get someone that's an elite level strength lifter, like you take him here, I mean, what are you squatting right now? I mean, not far from 5, right?
Yeah, probably. Something like
probably
that.
475, 480 at least. So you take 55% of that, and you're still squatting over 300 pounds for sets of 12. Like that's going to be exhausting on the body if you calculate up and add up that total volume. So someone that's a little stronger or has a greater level of base strength, I may even start the cycle at 50%, you know, just because I don't want to bury them too early in the cycle from accumulation of stresses. So again, you can kind of vary that based upon your level, but if you're in your first 1 to 3 years of lifting, you can have a broad base or just a general base. Like this percentage range is going to probably be your sweet spot.
So yeah, just recap hypertrophy. We're looking about the same set and rep number, 3 to 5 sets. On the reps, we're going to up those reps a little bit. We're looking at 6 to 12 as a basic range to look there. And then, like we said, that can be plus or minus a little bit, but for general purposes, we're putting it at 55 to 70%. So moving one further step to the right with endurance, then we'll finish up with power. On the endurance phase,
You want me to write it?
yeah, you got your
I got a marker.
Okay. So endurance phase, this is going to be more of what we like to call your capacity work. We're probably looking sets wise, we're going to actually back it down a little bit. And I would even say my general number is going to be 2 to 4, but you could even do a 1 to 4 depending upon how many reps you're actually going to push in this. And you want this marker, it works a little better. On the rep one, what we're basically going to say on this is 15 plus, because It really, and really you could probably cap it off somewhere around a 30-ish number, but at the same time, anything above 15, you're going to be pushing that endurance pace.
You're likely not to reach muscular failure here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
The weights
for
are
the
going to be
most
light
part.
enough, you're likely not to reach. It's not saying you can't ever and not get there, but like during the weight's going to be light enough that it's more you're creating a fatiguing aspect to handle more total work, but it's not going to actually get you to that failure.
Yeah. And then percentage-wise, this is definitely going to be one. Now it's going to be dependent upon the movement, but for the most part, you're well under 50%. I would even probably say more in like 30 to 40% range.
We'll say 30 to 50. 50% again, as you start getting into someone's a little stronger, like that's a lot of stress on the body. So someone that is a little more advanced, we're gonna spend more time here. Someone that's more in their first few years or a beginner to intermediate, we could be probably more around in that 40 to 50, maybe start at 30, but progress up quicker. You know, someone that's a stronger athlete, I may not even go up to 50. I may just spend 4 to 6 weeks in a 30 to 40% range, because I know that when I go back into heavy lifting on them, like they're gonna have enough stress from that. So I don't need to accumulate stress here. I'm trying to build up their ability to handle more work. And when you can handle more work, you're able to recover between sets better and after your sessions better. So the more work we can handle, hence when we go over here, we can get more strength work accomplished. So it's important that you do spend some time here, do some work here to help build those other aspects up.
So
Yep.
once again, quick little recap here on the endurance, getting it done in 2 to 4 sets, 15 plus rep range. We're not looking to go to failure by any means on this, but we are looking to create some fatigue there. So percentage wise or intensity wise, you're looking at that very low percentage. So somewhere between the 30 to 50% range. Okay. So finally, we're going to bring it all the way back here to our power. Now this is going to be typically what you'll see with a weightlifter, a power lifter. If you're in a strength conditioning setting, those max weeks that people are looking for, we're trying to peak someone to where they're going to pick up the most amount of weight possible. So what we're looking at here, if we're training for power development, even plyometrics as well, stuff where you just have to be explosive. To create power means you're creating speed over time, distance.
Yes, time and distance.
Time and distance, yeah. Been a while since I've been in class, so.
So with the power too, like, I mean, we do refer a lot to lifting, but like if you're a running athlete, a field sport athlete, a sprint athlete, you're still gonna be doing this type of stuff. You just don't want to push that's a little different story. You don't want to push intensity too crazy. It's more about moving the weights, moderate weights faster than moving max weights just to whatever speed I can. So the point, like you said, is rate of force of speed. We want to be able to get the brain to increase that neural drive really, really quickly. And so that'll be what he kind of leads you into here.
Yep. So number of sets we're typically looking at when we're looking at developing more power is going to be, so here we've started to actually work down a little bit on our sets here. We're actually going to work up on our sets. This is one I would actually say, I would give a general term of just a 5+. There's going to be a point of diminishing return there where you've done too many sets, that volume gets a little too high, therefore you're not producing that power or that speed or rate of force development that we're talking about. Would you say maybe a 5 to 10, 5 to 8?
Yeah, I think Propin's chart's 5 to 7 reps at 90% above.
Okay. Yeah.
So we'll link to, we may have popped it up on here, but link in the show notes as well on Prilipin's chart. So if you really want to take a deeper dive into it, Prilipin's chart is a very education, science-backed, researched flow chart you'll see for these set and rep ranges and a little bit more. And it'll tell you how many total reps generally give you optimal adaptation out of the stimulus you're trying to create. So Prilipin's chart is a really useful tool. Most exercise science students should learn about it in some form, when you're going over adaptations of resistance training or just training in general. But we'll link a Prilipin's chart in the show notes for you guys as well.
Yeah. So reps on this, once again, same general trend of obviously we started with strength. We're moving up in reps as we went that way. So on this one, we're going to be on that lower end. So we're typically looking in the 1 to 3. You could even argue a 1 to 2 rep range on that. You could still produce power with upwards of 3, but typically anything past that, you're going to start slowing down that rate that you're trying to move at. So we're going to stick with the 1 to 3 rep range there. And I would really emphasize, if you're truly working on power, you're really probably doing a lot of singles there. And you're getting adequate rest in between sets of it. It's something an experienced weightlifter or experienced individual is going to understand that. They may do 1 rep at 90% and they won't feel that tired from it, but they know for that to be a repetitive thing for however many sets that we're looking to accomplish, I'm going to rest anywhere from 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. All of that will be a little bit different per person, but you get someone younger who doesn't know, they may hit their 90% and they're like, oh, I want to go again right away. And then they fail on that second set.
So they grind it out.
Yeah,
it's
they
a more
grind it out.
stressful lift than it should be. You know what I mean?
So
I think too, to add to your point, like, you got to pay attention to what's called relative strength with an athlete. So what is their strength relative to their body weight? So, like, take myself for example. I'm a pretty good squatter. I have a big Olympic weightlifting background, and so when I'm working sets of 1 on a squat, like, a lot of times it's near double body weight, right? But if I'm working that on a bench press, like, I'm not that strong on a bench press. And so I may be a little sore for a few more days after that, like, bench press heavy session, but relatively, I'm not as strong at movement. So I could actually come back a little sooner and recover from that easier. So for instance, if I'm focused on power in a squat, I may start, let's say it's a 4-week block. I may start with 3s on week 1, but probably even 2s. I'll probably run 2s for the first 2 weeks and then singles the next 2 weeks. If I'm starting with someone who, like my bench press, for instance, I may spend 2 weeks with 3s, a week with 2s, a week with 1s, because I can still move my like 60% pretty fast because it's not that high to begin with. Does that make sense? So I think that's important to differentiate. Like, again, the higher that skilled athlete is, the more fatigue is going to be generated. So you do need to pay attention to that total volume, which is sets times reps times weight, and probably spend more time in that one end. If someone's not that strong yet, if we've got 13, 14-year-old athletes and we're in a power block that's maybe only 2 or 3 weeks, yeah, I may start with 3s on the first week because they're not even squatting their body weight yet. So they can still move those weights relatively quickly for multiple reps because there's still that learning curve there.
Yep, very good. And honestly, very simply, percentage-wise, really you're just looking at anything above 90% is kind of the number we're looking at for that. So we're just going to say 90 plus percentage there. And then obviously in an ideal setup, we've ran a block of training. We're trying to increase our 1 rep max on a back squat. Once we've got to that power phase, like you said, maybe a 4-week phase where we start off with triples, go into sets of 2 for week 2, and then we finish up week 3 and 4 doing singles. Anything above that 90%, especially the faster we can move it, is going to be a big factor of how likely you are to then increase that 1 rep max when you do go to try to max out or establish a new 1 rep max again. And the more, I would say, the more you can accumulate that 90% with the speed that you're looking to accumulate, that's going to be a big factor as to how much more your max is going to increase. So
I think too, with the power, this has been a big theme I've been really harping on. I deal with a lot more, honestly more, on a day-to-day basis, I deal with more adults than he does, but I still deal with a wide variety. I deal with a lot of kids as well. But when it comes to that 90% threshold, like that starts getting risky. Like, that's a heavy load. So if you're not that skilled, like, making sure that you are, maybe those weights are down a little bit from there, but the biggest thing with power, and so I was going out with, that's intention. Like, intention is important for all of these. Don't get me wrong. But if you really want to get a power adaptation, you actually can create power adaptations in a 40 to 60% range. But you need to move that bar as fast as fucking possible. Like, it is not just like I'm doing it. It's when I go down, I'm either controlled. If I'm still learning my groove, I'm controlled, and then I stand up as fucking fast as I can out of the squat. Or if I actually am really skilled, like being able to create that downward fast eccentric followed by a reverse fast powerful concentric, like that fast stretch, stop and reverse of the stretch shortening cycle actually will help generate more power output first. But when you start talking about moving fast or moving heavy weights, if you do not have the skill and coordination of the lift or the movement down very well, your risk of injury is going to increase, right? So this is where you do see, I don't want to go too far tangent on this because I go way down the road of this, but you see a lot of people start implementing Olympic weightlifting more in the power phase, right? Because it's weights that I'm not going to work up to as heavy in a squat or a deadlift, but you have to move them fast and precise, right? However, the problem with a lot of people with Olympic weightlifting, a lot of coaches, it takes, for me, it takes a good year to lay a good enough foundation that I can get that kind of training out of an athlete. So if I am going to only have an athlete for 2 or 3 months, I may still teach to them because I love the coordination aspect of it personally, but I'm not going to get those power adaptations out of it if they're just learning from scratch and I have a 3-month window. I am going to do things like explosive jumps, trap bar jumps, box jumps, pogo hops, med ball throws and slams, things like that. A lot of banded work. But if I've got someone, like I've got a kid right now that's just turned 14 this fall and I've been working with him since he's 9. Like the kid is clean and jerking over body weight. You set that foundation, he's set up to now be able to do that for the rest of his athletic career if he wants to, right? So, you can use different tools, but one thing we didn't really harp on early on in this is these are all going to be based primarily around compound movements.
Yep.
It's not 100% in that. Again, there's always, it depends variables, but you're going to see the best adaptations out of these movements with these sets and rep ranges and percentages using your compound movements, your big lifts that are multi-joint movements, your squats, your deadlifts, your front squats, bench press, overhead press, barbell rows, pull-ups. When you're really starting to talk about power, you can implement the Olympic lifts, but you're not really going to use those too much in these other areas. You can see some of those come through, but the lift happens so quick, so explosively, and the percentages generally to get the skill aren't high enough to create some of these other adaptations. And so you're going to use those more in those power situations. But understanding, I don't want to go focusing on my power on a calf raise per se. There might be a time and a place. I don't want to but if I'm sitting here trying to work on a seated calf raise, does that have some sort of benefit to it? Yes, I will sit there and argue with you that there is some form of benefit to it. However, is that worth the return of my time invested, right? Could I invest my time better off elsewhere? And most likely, yes, on something like that. So your compound movements are going to be the bigger ones that really help you see these changes a lot better.
Yeah. And kind of like I said earlier on in this, you can very easily run however long of a program you're doing where every single one of these is incorporated. And once again, this could be a deep dive wormhole that we get into with it, but to try to keep it as basic as possible, you can come in, say you're doing some form of jumping or med ball throws, or even your Olympic lifting. We'll say you're going to come in, you're going to snatch. That's going to be our power work for the day. So we're looking however many sets, however many reps, whether we're pushing that percentage threshold or not, or the intent of moving that bar fast and creating power. Well, then we're going to move on to a back squat on that same workout, where we're then producing some strength work out of it. We're going to go 3 sets of 5 at 80% today is what I say. That's what the call is for. Well, so we've established half of this chart already. So after that, we're going to have a couple movements to produce that hypertrophy, looking 3 sets of 8 on, say, a dumbbell row and a reverse lunge or whatever it may be.
Split squat, something.
Yeah, something. And then we can
2-3 moves,
we can finish up with maybe 1 or 2 things that we're pushing that endurance just to help build up a little capacity. That could be as simple as I'm going to do 100 walking lunges on each leg, or I'm going to hit a couple high rep sets of reverse hypers, or whatever it may be. That could be those calf raises that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
So you can very easily build in a program where every single one of these is put into it. And what I would honestly say for the general athlete that doesn't have a either specific goal or a specific time that they have to produce something, incorporating all these is probably one of your best things you can do. And what I would really, for the most part, I typically tend to tell a lot of people, sit in these 2 more often than not, add a little bit of power, add a little bit of endurance, you're probably going to do great. You're going to see good strength gain, you're going to see a little bit of musculature gain, and then just sprinkling in that, it's just going to keep you athletic. You're going to be moving well, being able to produce power, and then because you've incorporated a little bit of that endurance work, you can then probably recover a little better. If your workout does tend to take a little bit longer, you're not going to feel as fatigued from it. And so a lot of things go into incorporating all these into one thing or into one program.
Yeah, really, that's what we do a lot, or I do a lot with my clients. You can go your basic linear style where you'd spend 4 to 6 weeks here, right? And then you spend probably 6 to 8 weeks here, but at least 4 to 8 here, another 4 to 8 here, and then probably 2 to 4 there, And so you could plan out, if you want to go and focus a lot of your block in that, what's called linear periodization, it's the most basic form. It works really, really great for people in the first like 1 to 3 years of training. However, it's fucking boring. It is really boring. So with that being said, just because it's boring, it works awesome. So like, if you are a process-based person, like do this. This is be phenomenal for you. But if you are not, then adherence is going to be one of the biggest variables. And so if you can't stick through this slow, long-term process of like a block at a time, then you need to find ways to keep that adherence up. And so what he's talking about is one of the best ways, you know, even really like, I would say, I mean, I don't know what you think here, but out of these, I'd say at least 60, if not probably 70% of your time is probably spent between those two for the general population. Yeah. You're probably looking at 10 to 15% here and 10 to 15% here, you know, but you can also find ways to incorporate these within, you know, something I'll do a lot with athletes is what's called post-activation potentiation, right? So we'll do our warm-up, and then we'll move into a strength move, but it's supersetted, or French contrast strength is another really good one, where you have a couple strength movements, a couple explosive movements combined. But post-activation potentiation, I'd maybe go like, 3 sets of 5 on a squat, but I would superset it with maybe 3 sets of 3 to 5 on a box jump, right? And they're working on a max height box jump or a max explosion box jump to really help increase that rate of force and the power. And that's in one superset at the beginning, and you could go into the hypertrophy range, and let's say we're doing, a rear foot elevated split squat or a reverse lunge. You're doing a single arm dumbbell bent row, and then we do maybe a single arm farmer's carry for 40 to 50 yards aside. Well, now you could actually, because those movements don't necessarily overly fatigue each other, you could run that as a circuit, run it for 12 to 15 minutes. Now I'm actually checking this endurance box, and I'm getting in probably in that 12 to 15 minute range. I'm probably getting 4 to 6 sets of my movements here that's going to create a big hypertrophy adaptation. So that's a little more of your CrossFit-ish style that a lot of people tend to hate on, but it has a great use when applied properly. And so, or if applied properly. So like you can do some of these other variables within these two, but these two are gonna be, especially aimed at what most people's goals are. Most people wanna look better, they wanna feel better, they just wanna, a lot of it's that look, right? As much as we don't admit it, we work out to look good, like I don't admit it very often, but I wanna look good when I work out. So it's important that, we do not only spend time on the things that help with our goals, but like it's gonna give us the best return. Yep. And like I said, it's usually gonna be in, like he said, that 67% of the time in that strength and hypertrophy window.
Yeah. One more thing to add on, which could once again go into a major deep dive that we don't want to go to, is how we talked about that. Like he just said, doing a circuit there where you might be doing a rear foot elevated split squat with a dumbbell row with a 1-arm carry. This is going to tend, and it can go either way, but it will tend to, if you get away from your typical bodybuilder split of I've got arm day, I've got leg day, I've got chest day, I've got back day, whatever that split is. If you're incorporating multiple muscle groups per day, with this, you really need to also kind of give a basic look at the number of sets you're completing per muscle group per week, based off of what we're looking here. So if we're looking purely, I'm just trying to get stronger. And once again, I'm going to refer back to Dr. Andy Galpin with that episode with Dr. Huberman. He kind of talked about that 10 sets of that muscle group or of that particular movement is kind of what we're looking at as that minimum. And it was, if I remember right, it was a 10 to 20 set. And obviously you're
a big range there.
Yeah, big range there. We're also throwing in a bunch of different factors that we're not going to necessarily dive into. But if you can get 10 sets, and that can be just if we're really trying to hone in on getting our squat better, it may be 10 sets of squats that we do. Say we squat on Monday, we squat on Friday, and we hit 5 sets of each of them. There's your 10 sets right there. Or that could be 10 sets of leg work where Monday we do 3 sets of 5 on squat. Maybe we also do
RFP circuit. You got 4 more sets there, right?
There's 4. So there's your 7, and then a few days later, after our legs have recovered, we're going to do a couple sets of high rep walking lunges or something. That gets us our 10 sets there. And even if you follow more of a bodybuilder split, I feel, and once again, not set in stone, but typically if you train at least 4 days a week, we're going to stick with the legs on that. You're probably hitting legs at least twice, hopefully. I hope you do. If not, start hitting legs twice.
Foundation. You're never going to be strong. Your foundation's not strong. Think of building. If the building's foundation isn't strong, how long does that building survive? Yeah. Legs are the same thing.
And so let's take a hypertrophy standpoint, and for very basic, I don't recommend this, but let's say you did a simple 3 sets of 10 on everything. It's a leg day for you, you're probably gonna, I'd say, pick at least 4 or 5 exercises. Some may be more quad dominant, some hamstring, but we're just saying legs in general for now. So let's say you hit 3 sets of 10 on 4 different leg machines or a squat or whatever it may be. So 4 exercises times 3, you're looking at 12 there. You've completed 12 sets. If you do that again, you're actually on that higher end threshold. You've completed 24 sets. Now, once again, without deep diving, all of this comes into play: the number of repetitions, the number or the higher intensity, if I could learn how to talk. All that's going to go into play with what your volume is, which is really going to be based on how you feel, how you recover from it, and what all of these end up producing for you. So to backtrack, look at all this as a very basic setup to get you started, and then figure it out from there. And because we've talked about volume so much, I have a good feeling we're probably going to do a video about volume and the importance and need to know about that.
Yeah, I think like you said, just to remember, this is a very loose gauge. I think for you as an individual, or if you're training a group of individuals or team, look and see where your biggest deficits are in these categories. And then when do you need to be prepared by? If there's not a strict adherence goal, then you have some leeway. But if I know that I've got to get, athletes powerful in 8 weeks, and they're fit, regularly active athletes, like they're probably getting a decent amount of endurance work already in. And because my time frame is so limited, I may not do as much here. Or I'm going to add in just like 1 set at the very end each day, maybe the first few weeks, to help build that base and create adaptation a little more early. So when I go to peak them, and again, I don't want to go down too much of the rabbit hole of volume, but if I'm doing linear periodization, really what you're going to see is volumes moderate to high here. Volume actually is probably going to be moderate to slightly higher here, but generally you're going to see volume start to go down here and even down there. So volume is going to be one of the biggest variables when it comes to overall fatigue and fatigue management. And so knowing that if I need to spend time getting someone peaked in 8 weeks, then I need to have some sort of base to deload them from. On the flip side, if I've got 8 weeks to peak someone with power and they have no training base, I'm probably going to spend half the time here, and then I'm going to push these kind of 2 together probably for a 2 or 3 week window, and then a 10-day peaking. You know what I mean? Because I don't have a lot of time to do that, but I still have to build that base, or I'm never going to be able to get enough work done in these later phases or weeks to actually create the adaptation the way I'm looking to. So you really have to assess, first and foremost, like, where am I at? Where do I need to go? What are the biggest limiting factors in that assessment, right? If I'm someone that, like for me, for instance, right now, relative to my amount of training I do and things of that nature, my power and strength are pretty high, but my hypertrophy and my endurance isn't very great. So when I start getting into heavier sets of things, I get tired really quickly. So it's important for me to start looking to implement more of this type of stuff to help me handle that stuff better off down the road if I want to see those numbers go up. And you got to think about that not just in the short term. What does this look like over the course of 6 months, not just 6 weeks? What does it look like over the course of 2 years, right? Like accountability and adherence are the biggest variables to see progress. So you got to kind of keep all those variables in mind to a degree. And if at the end of the day, like, this stuff can be very confusing. I think that's important to really know. This stuff can be confusing. It can be hard to decipher, especially when you have a hard time being very objective with yourself. That's why it's important to have a coach, all right? Whether it's us, right? We do coaching, online coaching, or in gym if you're in Muncie area. If not, you need to find someone that you trust, because they can help give you that objective feedback. When I work with, especially the better my athletes get, actually, I'm going to say that I really ask for a lot of feedback from my athletes to see how they're feeling and where they want to go. So I make sure that I'm constantly modifying and adjusting their program as needed. I don't want to say constantly adjusting, and you don't want to adjust that much if you're playing well. But I do adjust as needed if those goals or needs change, and you got to know where your athlete's at and not just follow, well, the book says we should do it like this. Well, the book doesn't have the n=1 variable right in front of you, right? So, again, always know that it depends, and you got to look at a lot of variables and a lot of different variables when you're programming this stuff. And if you're not sure how to do it, or it's just too overwhelming, find someone you trust to help you.
Amen.
So, anything else you want to add?
I don't think so.
All right.
Just whatever you're doing, do it consistently. I mean, that's like you just said, that's the biggest thing. So find whatever the goal is, train consistent, and Yeah.
You're human, you're gonna have times it's not as regular, but I mean, at least 2 days a week, if you can get in is good. But the more the better. I always tell our athletes at the Arsenal, the more days you come in our doors than not in a week, in a month, in a year, the more likely you are to see success. That's our big guarantee at the Arsenal. The more you show up, the better your results are gonna be. And that's really up to you. We can't force you to come. We can't force you to go to the gym. That's gotta be on you. We can only give you the details to help guide it. So hopefully this helps give you some guide if you're not sure. And then let us know what you think. If this was helpful or beneficial, please share it with someone and give us some feedback below.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah.
Stay classy.